For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Redfern. I'm the UUJusticePA Environmental Justice Co-Chair, and the other co-chair of the team is Rachel Mark, who's on the call. And tonight's show is about In the Blast Zone, what you need to know about Mariner East. And our guest speaker is George Alexander. Before I get to George, I just wanted to send it over to Joan, Reverend Joan Sabatino, our director of UUJusticePA.
I know most of you, but not all, so I'll just give you my quick spiel here. Reverend Joan, director of UUJusticePA, formerly had a name of Unitarian Universalist Pennsylvania Legislative Advocacy Network. And you go into a legislator's office and try to say that without using the acronym 3 times in a 10-minute conversation. And I realized how out of whack we were. So our name now says who we are, what we do, and where we are. Unitarian Universalists working for justice in Pennsylvania. So we have 6 justice teams, of which environmental justice is one. I'm glad to be here with the team tonight and with their guests. And our website is UUJustice, the word justice, PA.org. And we're in the middle of a membership drive, and we hope that the program tonight will encourage you to become a member of UU Justice and follow us and watch our programs. I'll just stop there.
Okay.
And let you all take it away.
I'll just give a little bio on George. George is a retired journalist and marketer. Since learning about the Mariner East project in early 2017, he has felt a calling to spread the word about the dangers of the pipelines, the environmental damage they are contributing to, and the corruption and regulatory failure that is permitting their construction. His blog, The Dragon Pipe Diary, at dragonpipediary.com, has become a respected source of information about the Mariner East pipelines. He's a member of the leadership team of Del Chesco United for Pipeline Safety, and he was a president of the Faith Alliance for Pipeline Safety. I met George back in October of 2017 during a showing at UUCDC, during a showing of the documentary Groundswell Rising. One of the producers is Mark Lichty, and I thought Mark was going to be on the call tonight, but he's not here yet. 2 months later, I showed another documentary at our church. It was called America Subverted, and George was there as well. And by that time, during that presentation, you could certainly see that George knew a lot about the Mariner East pipelines. 2 months later, we basically, a small group of us formed a group called Faith Alliance for Pipeline Safety. George and I were in that. George was the president of that group. So that was about a little over 3 years ago when we started Faith Alliance for Pipeline Safety. So essentially, I'm about ready to turn it over to George. What I want to do is, Joan's not here, but I hope everybody puts themselves on mute. And we're going, question-wise, we're going to wait till the end. And when George is done, we'll take your questions. Does that sound good, George?
Sounds fine with me.
All right, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay,
Thank you
very much.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to start screen sharing here. Okay, there we are. So I'm going to be talking about the Mariner East pipelines, and in particular about a case before the Public Utility Commission called Safety 7, informally called Safety 7. But before we get to that, let me start out. First of all, let me get my slides advancing. There we go. Here's what I have in mind for the next 20-25 minutes. I'll be talking about Mariner East. It's an export pipeline project that gets materials, which I'll describe a little more specifically in a moment, from the Marcellus Shale in Western Pennsylvania to the port of Marcus Hook, and there it's shipped overseas. So that's the ostensible story, but fundamentally the part that I want to convey to you is that it's a cautionary tale about what happens when you have corporations that aren't properly regulated and politicians that have been bought out by the business interests that are involved, huge legal teams exploiting every possible loophole, and regulatory agencies that have been captured by and are mainly made up of veterans of the industries they're supposed to be regulating. And the purpose of this pipeline, as you'll see in a moment, is manufacturing plastic.
Yeah.
So I'll start with an overview and a little bit about the risks to the public, which for me is the key issue in this whole pipeline project. I'll talk about monitoring, how we have been monitoring pipeline construction because there has been no proper monitoring by the government. Talk a little bit about regulatory matters, and in particular this case called Safety 7. And there are a lot of other things I could be talking about: water damage, air damage to the air, woodlands destroyed, a lot of fracking issues, a lot of construction issues, the processing activities in both on the western end when the natural gas and other gases are separated, and on the eastern end where the gases are processed before shipping. But and then of course there's the plastic that mostly ends up in our waterways and oceans. But I won't have time to get into all that stuff, so I want to talk about risk mainly. First, a little bit of background on what this pipeline is and what it does. When you drill for natural gas, depending on what part of the country you're in, you may get a lot of other things coming out of the well. In Western Pennsylvania, you get a bunch of other gases coming up. The primary one is called ethane. So methane is natural gas, that's what you want. The primary byproduct gases you get, the biggest one is ethane, and then some propane and butane as well, coming up with the methane. You can't avoid that, and yet you also can't include those gases in with the natural gas when you ship it into the pipeline. They're too explosive. They have to be removed. So what do? You cool this mixture of gases down to minus 120 degrees, and everything but the methane becomes liquid, and you can drain it off, and you're left with pure methane, which is what you put into the pipe to be distributed to people as natural gas. So what do you do with the rest? Well, there is no market in Pennsylvania for the rest. There's a small market for some of the propane. The ethane there is no market for, and that's the main thing you've got. If you can't get rid of it, and it's very hard to manage, then you would have to shut the well down. So that was a quandary for the first drillers, but they found that they could get a pipeline built that would take this ethane to refineries in Europe. These are refineries that use ethane as a raw material for plastics. The main one is polyethylene. There are several others, polystyrene, which is styrofoam, polyvinyl chlorine, which is PVC for pipes and other purposes. Those all depend on ethane as feedstock. And it turned out that there were these refineries in Europe that needed this stuff because there used to be a lot of gas, natural gas coming out of the North Sea that was rich in this material, but those wells have dried up. So a pipeline was repurposed to get this to Marcus Hook. A special set of loading docks was constructed there. A fleet of 9 specialized ships was constructed for this, and it began carrying some of this material through an old pipe that was repurposed, a pipe from the 1930s, to Marcus Hook and taking it overseas. And construction began on 2 additional pipelines called, so that old one was called Mariner East 1. The 2 new ones were called Mariner East 2 and 2X. These materials that are extracted when you get the methane out, these byproduct gases, are called natural gas liquids. They aren't liquids in their native state, but you have to keep them under pressure to keep them as liquids, either low temperature or pressure. And in a pipeline, your only choice is high pressure. So they are kept in these pipes at very high pressure. typically 1,500 to 2,000 pounds per square inch. And if they get out, they become a gas immediately. And they're not like natural gas, because natural gas is lighter than air, it rises, and so it disperses readily, and it has an odorant, so you can tell it's there. These liquids, if they escape, they become a heavier than air fog, and they accumulate in low-lying areas, and they're very explosive. So they're far more dangerous than natural gas. How dangerous are they? Well, this is a diagram from some modeling software that shows the difference between natural gas, which is so this is how far downwind with a gentle wind a cloud will form that could be deadly for you if you're sitting there. For natural gas, it's a couple hundred feet downwind, and off to either side's no problem at all. For propane, which is one of these byproduct gases, the cloud can be 1,500 feet long and 1,500 feet wide. And for ethane, the cloud can be even bigger. This is an explosive cloud. If it encounters an ignition source, then everyone who's outdoors inside this cloud will be killed. And many of the people who are indoors will be killed by the explosive force. So this is an extremely dangerous situation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. This shows the route of these pipelines. And I should say, there are no other pipelines comparable to this in Pennsylvania. And if you consider the density of the population that this pipeline is going through, there are no pipelines comparable anywhere in the United States. This is the most dangerous pipeline to be in a populated area like Chester and Delaware counties. This shows the route through Chester and Delaware County. It comes down from the Marsh Creek area up here, down through Exton, comes right along by Granite Run Mall, through Aston, and down to Marcus Hook. Here's a population density map showing the same thing, and you can see that, okay, this is Delaware County down here. You can see that the brown areas are the areas of dense population, and starting from around Westtown and on down through the rest of Delaware County, and especially in the area near Granite Run and Aston, in that stretch, it runs through very highly populated areas. One of the locations that it runs by is Glenwood Elementary School. There's a valve station right there, so it's at the surface, it's not buried. If there were to be a rupture there, and it was an ethane rupture, and the wind were blowing northeast at a gentle rate, because that's where you get the least mixing and therefore the largest cloud, a cloud like this could form almost a mile in length. It would include Riddle Hospital, it would include the firehouse, it would include Granite Run Mall, and so on. And so if that were to encounter a source of ignition, and it surely would, because cars are a source of ignition, and doorbells are a source of ignition, air conditioners are, then this whole area, everybody who's outside would be severely burned, probably dead, and all the houses around here would be set on fire. There is no way for an emergency response to a situation like that. And this cloud forms in the course of 10 to 15 minutes, and it's fundamentally undetectable because there's no odorant, and it's colorless gas. So this is a hopeless situation for emergency responders. You just have to pray that something like that never occurs. Here's another instance of a place you might be familiar with. This is Marsh Creek State Park. When you come into Marsh Creek State Park, you come in on Park Road, and you're going out onto a peninsula here where the park is located. Mariner East crosses the road there, and if there were a leak in that vicinity, a cloud would form that would encompass the entire state park. Not only that, but if it were to then explode, a so that there's a huge explosive fire, and then there's what they call a torch fire or a jet fire that burns at the pipeline location until the gas is completely gone. That would be up here at Park Road, and there is no other road going into this area. So whoever was injured would be unrescuable. No help could get in. And anyone who thought they could get out, if they had the means, they would be blocked by this fire at the pipeline source. So if something like that were, I'll grant you, it's unlikely, but if something like that were to happen, and sooner or later all pipelines leak, then the loss of life would be immense, and there would be no helping the people until the fire burned itself out, which is 12 to 24 hours for a pipeline like this. Fortunately, we haven't had an urban area explosion of this type of pipeline in the United States, but it has happened elsewhere. Here's one in Taiwan. This explosion was so extreme that some cars ended up on top of buildings that were 3 stories tall. And I don't remember how many casualties there were, but it was in the hundreds. Now, the areas that these pipelines run through here are not quite as built up as this mostly, although it does go right by Chester County Library and the Chester and the Exton Mall. And there are places in Aston where it's quite built up. There is no credible plan for warning or evacuation. The Delaware County Director of Emergency Services, whose name is Tim Boyce, has basically said it's hopeless. There is no way we can respond to this kind of emergency. And there is, so Sunoco doesn't have a good way of telling if a leak has occurred. They can monitor pressure on the line, but pressure variations are a normal part of pipeline operations. So unless it's really extreme, they don't know if a leak has occurred. And in fact, in all the cases that I'm aware of where serious leaks have occurred in lines like this, it's the public that has discovered the leak and notified the authorities, not Sunoco. If a leak is discovered, the emergency responders are told to set up a perimeter, keep people away from it, and not to go in. So if you're in there, you're on your own. You have to self-evacuate and you have to do it on foot, because if you drive, you'll set it off. It will explode. And of course, how do you know it's even it has even occurred? You probably don't. What's the current status of these pipelines? Sunoco currently has 2 pipelines running. The old 8-inch pipeline called ME1, Mariner East 1, which is from the 1930s and was repurposed for this. And then one which we refer to as the Frankenpipe, because it has parts of the 2 new pipelines and part of an old 12-inch line, also from the 1930s, that have been cobbled together because they were unable to complete construction on either of the 2 new ones. In Delaware County, the remaining construction now is at Glen Riddle, the apartment complex called Glen Riddle Station, just south of Granite Run Mall. And I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. In Chester County, there are a number of places where construction is not complete, including at Marsh Creek Lake, where the construction was halted when they had a release of drilling fluid that polluted the lake, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Because the government and the regulatory agencies don't really monitor things very well, it's been up to citizens to do that, and quite a few people have been involved in that, including 3 people who have drones that they can fly and look at places that otherwise Sunoco, the pipeline operator, won't, or the construction operator, won't let us in. So here, for example, is a drone picture of a sinkhole near Slayton Park at Forge Road and Valley Road. This sinkhole took out that entire section of Forge Road. And in fact, the drilling process for putting these pipelines in has been causing sinkholes all over the place. The worst of them probably in the Exton vicinity, but there's been a bunch in our area too, and there continue to be some in, for example, in Middletown, Delaware County. And I should mention, for the sake of you who aren't from this part of Pennsylvania, that there are plenty of these problems in the rest of Pennsylvania too, including, for example, Mechanicsburg, just west of Harrisburg. It runs right along the edge of town and would be, it has the kind of devastating potential there that I indicated for the area around Granite Run. When we drive around, we look for odd things. This is a sinkhole in the process of formation that somebody found just by driving by, took a picture, and sure enough, it turned out this one's near Exton. It turned out that it was one of several sinkholes in this area that then had to be reported to the Department of Environmental Protection and the Public Utility Commission. Sunoco is supposed to do that reporting, and occasionally they do, but mostly they don't. Here's a drone shot that's been annotated with a bunch of pictures of indications of where sinkholes were. This is along Business Route 30 in Exton. There were, at this point, 7 sinkholes in that vicinity. Now there's over a dozen. This is not far from the Chester County Library. Here's a drone shot of drilling fluid leaking into Marsh Creek Lake. This was taken by one of the Mariner East drone observer people, and was the first indication of any problem at that site. This caused construction to be shut down last fall, and it has yet to resume. Sunoco is fighting with the Department of Environmental Protection whether they can go ahead with their planned route for the pipeline, or whether they have to reroute it farther from the lake. And so far, we don't know how that will turn out. Here's a big drilling project going on at the Glen Riddle Station Apartments on Glen Riddle Road, just south, basically south of Granite Run, between Granite Run and well, I think south of Granite Run is the way to describe it. And you can see that big machine in the middle of the picture. It is involved in drilling and pounding a casing through the ground to be connected about 1,000 feet away with another section of pipe farther up the hill. There have been a lot of problems with this one, and the sound barriers, the green barriers that you see there, are in violation of fire code, but Middletown Township has been unwilling to enforce the code. These people have been subject to all kinds of noise and dust and so forth. And the apartment complex owner has been trying to get some things rectified through the legal system and through regulators, but without success so far. Across the road from those apartments, this is behind the Tunbridge Apartments. Turned out that flaring of some of the gases in one of the pipelines was going on there. That too was contrary to what Sunoco was permitted to do at that site. And where the flare is located on the right-hand side of this picture is actually on property that Sunoco doesn't have permission to be on, owned by the Borough of Media. The Borough of Media is aware of this and other encroachments on its property, but has been unwilling to take any action to prevent Sunoco from just using property it doesn't have right to. The Safety 7, okay. This is a group of 7 residents of Delaware and Chester County who filed a complaint, and the lawyer in the middle is working for free, pro bono. Michael Baumstein, he's a wonderful lawyer. filed a complaint with the PUC, which I'll tell you a little bit about. The three people in the lower right-hand corner are three women who independently filed complaints with the PUC without lawyers, called pro se complainants, and the PUC combined their complaints with the Safety 7 complaint. Formal name of the Safety 7 complaint, Flynn et al. Versus Sunoco Pipeline. And a fifth complaint, the Andover homeowners case, was also consolidated by the PUC. So fundamentally what this raises is safety concerns. The guidance that Sunoco is giving for what to do in case of a leak is not credible because it's not possible for a lot of people to do what's required, which is to go half a mile upwind on foot. And there is no system in place for warning when there is a leak, so no way for residents to know that. And if it's the middle of the night, if the weather is bad, if you have mobility problems, if you have small children, how are you going to do this? It's just not practical. Sunoco claims that because this is industry guidance, this is what the industry says is okay, that it's okay not to do any better than this. But in fact, it's completely unsafe and impractical. And so the Safety 7 complaint is fundamentally about whether the mission of the PUC, which involves public safety, is being honored or not in this case. They are asking for a credible evacuation plan, and until that is created, to shut the pipeline down. And if a credible evacuation plan is not possible, then they should be shut down permanently. Status of the case, the hearings, which stretched over a year and a half, have wrapped up now. The final briefs, there was a series of briefs and counter briefs were submitted in January, and the judge will rule on this in April. And it's pretty clear that whichever side wins, it'll get appealed. So I hope you get the sense that this is a serious problem. A lot of people are saying this cause is hopeless because Sunoco has all the money in the world, they have the politicians in their pocket, and they have a lot of pipe already in the ground. They've spent billions. But it's so clear to people who take a close look at this that this is one of those cases where there is right and there is wrong, and Sunoco's on the wrong side of this one. That in spite of the difficulty, it makes sense to try and oppose this. And public pressure is growing. There's a lot more knowledge and pressure than there ever has been. People have been elected to the state legislature on the basis of their opposition to this pipeline system. Most new legislators and people running have to express opposition to these pipelines in order to run. So it's promising, but at the same time, Sunoco is trying hard to finish up this pipeline before the pressure gets to the point where they can't. So how can you help? Contact Governor Wolf and your Harrisburg representatives. Make sure that pipeline opponents get elected. Ask the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Environmental Protection for help. Join opposition groups. There's probably one in your neighborhood. And if you don't find one, let me know. Follow the Support Safety 7 Facebook page. That's a good source of continuing source of information. And you can subscribe to Dragon Pipe Diary at www.dragonpipediary.com. That's my blog, and you'll find a lot of good information about the pipeline there. Right now, the key thing for I would say is helping the Safety 7 team meet their financial obligations. The lawyer, as I said, is working pro bono, but there were 2 expert witnesses required that were very expensive, and we're still struggling to get them completely paid. So what I would like you to do is to go to the Support Safety 7 Facebook page and follow the GoFundMe link there. And until March 19th, whatever money you donate will be doubled. We have a matching grant. So thank you. I think that concludes the information that I have, and I am open to questions.
Well, thanks for a wonderful presentation, George, and hopefully it's you gave us an optimistic ending there. You know, there is hope, there is light, I think, at the end of this, not tunnel, but pipeline, so to speak.
Right.
Two things I just wanted to mention. Maybe people know, I didn't hear it in your presentation, but I know, I guess Sunoco and maybe the DEP call it a buffer zone, but we refer to it as a blast zone. You know?
Yeah.
And,
or some people call it a sacrifice zone.
Sacrifice zone. Okay.
Yeah. So that can extend as far as a mile from the pipeline, depending on what kind of a leak it is.
And that Sunoco, I guess, has the worst safety record of any pipeline company in the country.
Yeah, so you can calculate that in a couple of ways. They come out in the top 3 no matter how you do it. So yeah, they're really bad.
They're really bad. Yeah. Any questions? Peg?
I wanted to know if George knows the address of the GoFundMe. If you go to GoFundMe, what subject do you type in?
So it's hard to find by going to GoFundMe. The best way to get to it is to go to Support Safety 7 on Facebook. And then it's right at the top of that page, the GoFundMe link is. And Support Safety 7 is spelled out with the word 7 spelled out, not the number.
Okay, Brian?
Yeah, so when I was talking to Bill Clinton there earlier, what I was doing when I was in Glen Mills was I was with the Concordville Fire Department. And I do remember some of this, of what you're talking about there. But my question to you would be, it seems like Sunoco should be the target of some type of action itself. Is there any type of organized movement against the company?
Well, so Sunoco is owned by Energy Transfer, and there are various efforts to oppose Energy Transfer, which also is the owner of the operator of Dakota Access Pipeline and part owner of it. And so there have been efforts to demonstrate at the corporate headquarters and so forth. In terms of local stuff, there have been a lot of pipeline demonstrations here, not more broadly against Sunoco, but specifically against this pipeline. I should say Sunoco has a lot of pipelines in the area, some of which carry gasoline, fuel oil, jet fuel, things that are far, far less dangerous. And I don't fault them for that. I fault them for this, for Mariner East.
Sure.
Any other questions?
So, yeah, I have a question. Mariner East has been built, but it's not functioning yet. Is that the story?
So there are 2 pipelines functioning right now. There's an old 8-inch pipeline from the 1930s that's being used to transport these materials. And then there is a pipeline that consists of parts of the new pipelines and some old pipelines. And the 2 new pipelines called Mariner East 2 and 2X, they are not built yet. Parts of them are in use and connected to this old 12-inch line. We call it the Franken pipe because it's made of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But Mariner East 2 and 2X are still under construction. Neither one is complete in Delaware or Chester County. For the most part, they are complete in Pennsylvania west of the Susquehanna.
I just wanted to add that original Mariner East pipeline, as George said, was built in 1930, and it was sending refined crude oil products from South Philadelphia out to central and western Pennsylvania. And Mariner, with the shale gas and fracking going on in the Marcellus Shale region, that it's the direction of flow has been changed, as well as the type of product in there. And it wasn't built for the NGLs.
And the really bad route that Mariner East takes is partly because of that history. Because if you're shipping fuel, oil, and gasoline and so forth west from Philadelphia refineries, then you want to go through the heart of built-up areas, because that's where the fuel, oil, and the gasoline is needed. And so by reversing that pipe, they managed to put the most dangerous stuff through the most populated areas. It makes no sense, but that's what happened.
Is there a website that shows the location of these lines? I live in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and I know there's a few pipelines that go not far from our home.
Yeah. So there are, let's see, what's the best way of getting, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email, I can send you a link. And I can also send you a map showing where it runs just on the southern edge of Mechanicsburg alongside the interstate there. So the whole south side of Mechanicsburg is within the blast zone of this pipeline.
Dave, can you put your email address in the chat box? Is that possible?
Yeah, let me do that.
All right.
Bill, unmute yourself.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the spill that happened in the lake and the fact that the construction was stopped. So what was that the construction of? ME2, MEX?
That's ME2. And the method of construction in areas where they have to go under bodies of water, in this case under wetlands and some streams, is what they call horizontal directional drilling. And that involves a horizontal, diagonally into the ground and then horizontally with special drilling techniques that allow them to steer the drill. But it involves forcing a fluid down the drill bore pipe, which spins the cutting part of the drill and allows the drill to advance. That material then flows back to the source point, gets cleaned of cuttings and so forth, and then goes back through again. So it should be a closed loop. But if the drill runs into a place where there's a crack in the rock or some other way for the fluid to escape, then it won't come back to the drilling point, and it will flow into whatever spot it has found to escape. And in this case, it found that it could escape into a stream feeding Marsh Creek Lake. And so around somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 gallons of this drilling fluid went into the lake at that point.
So then the construction was stopped. So then the spillage into the lake was stopped.
Yes. And the DEP told Sunoco that they had to reroute the drilling, the path of the pipeline, and Sunoco is in the process of appealing that decision. They don't want to do that.
So so is the lake, I mean, is this like an oil spill on a lake where it's permanently damaged?
So it sinks. The drilling fluid is heavier than water. And so it has damaged the bottom dwelling plants and animals in one large cove area of the lake. But and Sunoco claims they're cleaning it up, but it's hard to see how they do that. And that process is apparently underway.
Yeah. So the other question that I have is just, where's the governor on this? You know, I know he's been subject to all kinds of pressure from all kinds of groups. And do you have a sense of what his position is, or where is he in his evolution of this project?
So he has been incredibly silent on it, really. What should I say? So there was a scandal in his office 2 years ago where it was found that a close associate of his, one of his advisors, had been working with both Sunoco and the Department of Environmental Protection to keep some a process that would have slowed down the pipeline from happening, a normal regulatory procedure. And that there was an FBI investigation and so forth. I don't think any, so there was an ethics investigation, and they found that there was wrongdoing, but I don't think anybody's been punished for anything. And because that came so close to the governor, it's been very hard to tell what his actual position is, whether he was involved and aware of what was going on in his office or not. But he's been totally silent.
Mm-hmm. And who do you see are the legislative activists that would support essentially banning the pipeline?
So, and until the end of his term, Senator Dinniman from Chester County has been a key person. And now there are several people in the House who have been elected on this with pipeline activism as a key part of their platform, and they are starting to have an impact. But and then some existing ones like Katie Muth, for example, some people who are already in the House have been active on this too.
So one of the folks that just got elected was Diane Herron to the House.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a sense of where she is on this?
I understand that she's an opponent, but I don't have a strong sense.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you.
I just wanted...
Bill, if you talk to Eric Friedman, he will tell you, you know Eric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
He will tell you all about who's who in the political part of this. I'm not as good a resource for that.
All right.
I just did want to mention, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, Governor Wolf came to, I think it was West Whiteland Township or East Whiteland Township, George.
I think it was actually East Goshen, maybe.
East Goshen, okay. I know that he was met there by some of the anti-pipeline folks like ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember him saying about, trying to, whether this could be stopped or not, but he said, this is the safest way to get the product to the market. The product being, the
pipeline, rather than putting it on trucks or.
Right. So it was like, well, this is going to happen, politics and money, but this is the safest way to do it was his, what I heard him say.
Yeah, and there are interesting questions around that, and a lot of people will tell you that. So there are two other pipelines out of the Marcellus that carry this stuff, one down to the Gulf Coast and one up to Canada. Whether they could carry the amount of material that these pipelines are expected to carry once they're done, probably not, but they can carry what's being produced now. Trains do carry it to some degree. Barges carry it in some parts of the country, and the Ohio River is very close where this stuff is being drilled. So there are alternatives. It's not like this is the only thing you can do, is to send it right through Marcus Hook.
But if I may, so if you weren't, is there a way to bury the ethane? Is there a way to get rid of the ethane once you've got it?
There really is not. It's very hard to contain. If you store it in a tank, it has to be under very high pressure. If you put it underground, it will escape as a gas. I mean, that's what gases do. It's possible to put it in salt caverns. That's the way they store it temporarily for processing down in the Gulf Coast. You can hollow out a salt cavern and put it in there, but that's not a permanent solution either. So
this is like nuclear generating waste where they've got.
It is. I mean, so what can you do with it? You can turn it into plastic, and that's not really what a good solution.
The answer is to stop fracking. If we don't, we stop the fracking, then none of this is going to happen. You know, no pipeline, no shipping overseas to make more plastic, no concerns about you know, living along in Delaware County, Chester County, whatever. So we're